Hello everyone and welcome to ClearTalk. So in today's video, we are going to talk about the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Um, I've got some graphics and stuff that I can show, try to give you a look at that and the regression that happened as far as land ties and stuff like that, and some events and things that happened over the years that contributed to that. And then and just kind of I'm also going to fill in a little bit of just things that I read about as I was looking into all this conflict, because when October 7th happened, um, and the days leading after that, I really regrettably um, didn't completely, like, I didn't know the history of the conflict, like fully understand it. I knew that there had been, conflict and land fighting, for years, but I didn't. I guess I really had never really learned all about the different, events and stuff, and how it started, and all that. So I really wanted. I kind of took the time to do some research and figure out just what was going on and what led us to events of October 7th, um, and you know why people are in power, those are in power, why those who have land that have land, why is it occupied, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we're going to talk about all that, and then I'm going to talk about how I feel about all that, and uh, yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get to it. All right, so here's the graphics. Uh, so basically, okay, you had just a quick throwback. You have the World War II going on, um, and the Jewish people with Germany, Hitler, all that thing. We know all the story. You know, uh, you had Jewish people um, becoming refugees all across Europe. Most of which I think was pretty much in Britain, stuff like that. But I had them all across there, um, and uh, basically the area down what is now considered Israel was all Palestinian. The Palestinian people lived there, dwelled there, had been dwelling there for um, quite a while. I mean, hundreds of years, from what I understand, um, since the last time the main, I guess. Anyways, so but you had uh, hardcore Jewish um, extremists that have this sort of religious ties, the religious ties that they feel that they have to the region, um, because of the biblical reasons and stuff, the promised land, stuff like that, that was promised to them by God thousands of years ago, and all that, um, which is pretty much known as Jewish Zionists. Okay, so that main advocation for that group, that started in 1897, but it probably didn't really get going good till later on, I would assume. They the British, because of all the you know refugees and stuff, coming out of those that lived, coming out of Germany and stuff, and Britain wanting to help in this movement to get them their land, or at least get some kind of land established for them, uh, and try to protect them from what happened in World War II from ever happening again. Uh, you had the Balfour Declaration happen in 1917, um, where James Balfour approves the creation of a national homeland of Jews in Palestine. So because of, they wanted to get back to that area, and to the promised land, uh, through British, the help of Britain. They, took, they went down there to the land, and Britain was with, military forces and everything. This was early on throughout the 20s and stuff like that. From what I understand, or what it's appeared to me, is that Britain was trying to help, was trying to get, like, was trying to seem to, like, that first they were initially just trying to get them a little piece of land, like, at least a third of the land, so it'd be like a two-thirds split, uh, where two-third would be Arab, one-third would be, Jewish, and they there was a lot of, like, battles and stuff like that happening, that was British soldiers along with Jewish, soldiers and stuff, Jewish people helping. And the Arabs, were, they weren't that militant or anything, um, or at least not like heavily militant, not to the ability of the British armies, of the time. And so it wasn't really that hard. It didn't seem, for them to push them back, um, and take over land, um, and that was all through the 20s, and 30s. And but the desire to, what come off to me is that the desire for the, Jewish, the Zionist, organization of that, the grouping, the group there, they so desired to have more and more of the land, that they kept pushing and pushing and pushing, um, military, like starting stuff or whatever. And it appeared to me that it, even Britain started to kind of go against it. Like, they were like, it's kind of like, look, you've got land, you need to just settle and take this land or whatever. But they wanted more, more and more, to the point that they eventually started even fighting back against the British. And you had, so at that point, Britain basically was like, look, fine, y'all do what you want to do. We're going to back out. And and that's basically, from my understanding, what kind of happened. Britain backed out, and uh, eventually you had the uh, the UN come up with a partition plan in 1947, which was to try to help create two states, Palestine and Israel, um, or some type of state for, the Jewish people. I don't know that Israel was the name of it yet, or that probably was established. That's what they were probably going for. But of course, the Arabs were they were rejecting it, did not agree with it. And I believe that's pretty much like the Arab leaders, like around in the surrounding area, from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. I'm pretty sure probably Saudi Arabia and all those were in that as well. Um, and they really didn't, they weren't agreeing on it. Um, uh, but then in 1948 through 1949, you had the Arab-Israeli War, um, and that's when the Israeli state was established. Um, or that's where they were declaring for independence for a new state. Um, and eventually in 49 is when, um, with the help of, I think, some European, like British, and I think even help from the U.S. at that point, because when Britain started to back out, that's when the U.S. really started to kind of get their hands in on the situation. You had a lot of Christian Zionists here, and stuff that were trying to also help with that, the Zionist movement to take over this land and to get or to create a established Jewish land. Um, so pretty much that's, with their help, they were able to beat the Arab nations, forces and establish the state of Israel. Um, and that's when an estimated about they were able to control about 78% of the Palestinian land, and there was about 700,000 roughly Palestinians that became refugees. And those refugees were spread around across the different countries, surrounding countries. Jordan, Syria took some. I think even Lebanon had some, maybe Egypt. But then the rest of them were within Israel or within their Jewish, uh, within the Palestinian lands at that time, which you can see here in 1947. These were the lands that were occupied by Arab, and then this was all Jewish. Um, in 47, then by 48, Israel had taken everything. Um, this was the 78% here. And then you had this strip here, which is Gaza. Um, and then all this is the East Bank. I'm sorry, the West Bank. Um, and then Jerusalem was always been the fight between the Jewish and Christian and Islam. Like it's always been a fight in Jerusalem. So that was all. Um, um that was basically taken over. Well, it was held by as like a international zone for a while, where it was basically UN controlled all of Jerusalem because it being such a conflicted area between all three religious groups and uh, so they held that for a while, and then eventually it got divided between Palestine and Israel. So you have West Jerusalem controlled by Israel, East Jerusalem supposed to be controlled by Palestinians. Um, and then, so that's when the main formation of Israel happened, was in 1949 or 48, 49. And that's what come of it between the years of 49 and then 67. So there was all constant fighting, like just, small skirmishes and argumenting and stuff like that, all through those years to the point that eventually it grew up with all the surrounding countries and stuff, um, into what became the 6 Day War, where all of those countries are they all kind of combined together to go against Israel, but of course with the backing of the United States mainly, and of course other allied nations through Europe, um, because of the U.S., but mainly U.S. support. Um, None of them had a chance. Israel was able to take on um, all of them at once and took the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. They took Golan Heights from Syria. They took the part of the West Bank that was technically supposed to be controlled by Jordan, because Jordan had some occupation and control of parts of the West Bank, um, or pretty much all of the West Bank, where they were supposed to, between 49 and 67. Uh, so that's when um, Israel took all of that. Eventually, through um, talks and stuff, they eventually wind up giving the Sinai back to Egypt, and that's when Egypt and Israel started their recognized Egypt recognized Israel as a state, and they started their little peace treaty and whatnot, and that was in '82. So between '67 and '82, Israel even had the Sinai Peninsula. Um, and then you wind up having the first Intifada, which is the Intifada. Is all, you've heard, I'm pretty sure, and all the stuff about that being an uprising, but it's like an uprising against Israel and Jews or whatever. The first Intifada was in '87 to '93. Palestinians began a mass uprising in Gaza, and this civil disobedience and stuff like that spread to the West Bank. So you wind up having a whole lot of uprising going on, um, and and then that's when in '93 to '95 you had the Oslo Accords. So that's when Palestine and Israel they signed the Declaration of Principles, which basically was them recognizing each other as government bodies, um, uh, autonomous government bodies, and the West Bank was split into three zones. One that was fully occupied by Palestine Authority, the PA, one that was jointly controlled, and then one that was controlled by Israel. Um, so that's when that happened. And then you had uh, Camp David summit, which is where because in between there that was in 2000. So you also had Israeli had some uh, of their army and stuff occupying parts of Lebanon at that time as well. In between those times, and they pulled out of Lebanon at that time, and they to help with, like, I guess Lebanon and Israel to come to a settlement agreement. Um, or no, I guess it was this. They were trying to come to an agreement between Israel and Palestine, but that failed, and that's led to the Second Intifada, another rising up of violence and stuff like that, and that lasted for 5 years. Um, in between all that time, you had the UN, European nations, and the U.S. and all, even Russia was trying to help, like, create this roadmap for Palestinians to have a state, for the two-state solution. That's been going on since 2003, like hardcore, or well, somewhat hardcore. It's been going on since 2003, 20 years, and they still haven't gotten that. Um, and then that's when you had in 2005, after the Second Intifada, um, that's when Israel, so-called, um, pulled their defenses and stuff, pulled all their occupation from Gaza, and also supposedly, like, pulled their forces from the West Bank, um, as a disengagement. But obviously that did not stay that way. That's when in 2006 the uh, you had the uprising of Hamas, which was aided by Netanyahu, backing them to give them credibility as a governmental power for the Gaza Strip. That was his way of keeping the West Bank and Gaza from actually being able to, coalesce and come closer to getting a Palestinian state, trying to keep them divided. Um, so most of this, um, you basically had, Palestine, Jews, mostly led by the Zionist, Jewish Zionist bound to take the land, and eventually establish, full control. I mean, even to this day, they're still trying to fight for full control. They want it from uh, river to sea. I mean, they want all of it, honestly. Um, and to even get to the uh, biblical, records of Israel, they would even have to take some of Jordan, some of Syria. I think even some of Egypt. I mean, there's way more span that they technically would have to take to really get all that land back. Um, but I don't know if that I don't see that ever happening. But um, they ultimately want to take all of it. That's the reason why now, there has been, you have those big, sort of leadership and stuff in Netanyahu's group and governmental. Um, I can't remember what they're called, but anyways, um, constantly talking about, expelling all the people from Gaza and resettling it. That's what they want to do. It's the reason why you have so many of them also backing all the illegal settlements in the West Bank, to where now the West Bank is broken up into even more than three zones. I mean, there's I can't even remember how many now, six or seven, I think, or something like that, or maybe more. And uh, they've done more and more, as you see right here, um, how much this is all broken up now in the East Bank, and what, a little bit Palestine has in control. And I think this is even a little bit dated. This graph is a little bit dated. Uh, I can't remember. I don't know when this was exactly. Uh, but anyways, uh, so yeah, you can see that, how much is broken up, and I think it's even worse now, uh, because they're constantly, Zionist settlers are constantly going into the West Bank and breaking up, pushing Palestinians off their lands and taking the lands, and it's just more and more and more. You have thousands of settlements now, um, all across the West Bank, where they've taken land, forcing the Palestinian people either into their, relatives' homes, or into encampments, or whatever, or even killing them. And Yeah, that's the current situations. So, um, yeah, like I said, you basically had uh, British, along with eventual U.S. help, leading up to the war in '48, where Israel was eventually established, um, taking, 78% of the land and creating what you see here in '48. Um, and then constant, bickering and back and forth and disagreements and little skirmish fightings and stuff, all the way up to the '67 war, where several countries got involved. But of course, with the help backing of the largest uh, military in the world, they were able to, giving them uh, everything they need, weapon rise and everything else. They were able to take on and even gain more, even gain more land, um, before eventually returning part of it. Um, they still have the Golan Heights even today. Um, but Yeah, that's what constantly happened, is just conflict after conflict. But it's ultimately, The conflict arises with the Palestinians because they had all majority of their land taken from them, and consistently having land taken from them even today. So they have less and less and less land, um, and uh, that is land that is a part of their history and sacred to them, um, just as much, if not even more, than what um, Israelis and the Jewish, history there in the land. I mean, you could argue back and forth who was there first. I mean, going back, it was, we're talking about thousands and thousands of years here. That's irrelevant to current people, or even with the last 100 years. Um, but this is a fight. This is really basically a religious fight, biblical fight that has been going on for this piece of land now, um, since the early 1900s, and Israel has gotten the better part of it because um, they've got more military force, got the backing and money uh, of the biggest militaries in the world, um, and talking about people that with Palestinians who don't have much of anything as far as uh, don't really have an army. I mean, outside of the uprising of Hamas, and like I said, they were pretty much just a guerrilla army that's um, you know using guns and RPGs, stuff like that, and makeshift missiles to shoot out of the Gaza Strip, um, which is threatening, most certainly. But um, if you take the history here into play and understand that looking at it, you have the Jewish Zionists, which is behind the biggest push for all of this, all along, and they're doing it all for religious, you know, biblical reasons, the Promised Land, things like that, whatever. And then you have Palestinians who, um, it probably, obviously religiously they have sacred, like ties to the land as well, but they've been forced off of all the land, and put under occupation and under military control, resource control, you know um, uh, very little to no rights at all. Um, they are talked about like animals, and like they're not human. Um, and I mean, and it's and not even. I mean, and even some of the surrounding Arab countries. I mean, they don't necessarily per se like them either. I mean, it's not like they defend them, to a degree, but it's not like it's not like they are like just wholeheartedly like you know uh, family or something. It's not they just kind of they don't they do enough to make sure that they don't just are not eradicated, uh, but it's not like they are like jumping that hard to anyway. So it's kind of, if you think about it, if you put yourself in the shoes of the everyday Palestinian person, um, I mean, you can kind of you can have some understanding or reasonability to uprise, to get mad that you're being treated the way you're being treated, and like different things happening, um, agreements between countries and stuff, and peace treaties and recognitions of one person or one group of people having a state, but you can never be recognized and given a state, or rights or anything. I mean, you can kind of understand where the frustration, anger, anxiety, and everything else, to uprise and get mad. And it's like, when people are desperate, they go to desperate measures, right? So I mean, you can't help but to some degree kind of understand it, and you know, and I'm not, I never defend violence, but I can understand why somebody would get to that point, or even a whole group of people get to that point. Um, um, so I mean, now I completely don't agree with any kind of violence against innocent people. Um, but and I don't really condone violence, period, at all, unless absolutely necessary to defend yourself. Um, but like I said, I can kind of understand. Um, I can kind of understand them, you know, under desperation, acting out. I mean, anybody would. Um, so, anyways, but that's the history, the best I can really give it to you. Hope maybe, I'm sure there's so many other sources that could give it to you and probably give it to you way better. But maybe I gave something that, and I'm not saying that mine's 100% correct. I'm kind of just giving a kind of overall summary, just hitting some bullet points, and from some stuff that I read that maybe it's some sources and people aren't really even saying or talking about. Um, but anyway, hopefully you learned something from that. If you like this type of video, uh, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if you want. Let me know what you think. Let me know anything that I may have missed. Anything I said that you hadn't heard before, or and um, yeah, pretty much. Just give me your thoughts on the video, and anything else you would like me to cover or talk about, um, with this or anything else. So anyway, thank you and peace. I'm out.